Hi, welcome to the second interview on solutions for the economic problems that we are facing in America right now. This video is going to be on regulations and how lessening regulations make things more productive, makes things cheaper, and can bring back jobs. So let's dive right in. Now on the top of the board, we have two examples here. I have the example of USA, and this isn't all of the permits and regulations you would need. This is to start a manufacturing facility. This is just a handful of what I could come up with off the top of my head. And we have over here, if we had less regulations, more like what China has, about what it would cost. Now, looking into it, in the US, you have to have insurance. You have to meet the EPA and OSHA protocols, which is your safety and environmental, which means you have to buy a bunch of books, materials, you have to educate your workforce, take time out of production, you have to supply them with stuff just because that it's an OSHA regulation. It costs a lot of money to do this. Move on down, you have your county license, your state license, and then on top of having to do all this training and buy certain stuff and permits inside the building, now you have to pay the EPA so much. And there's a lot more than that. That's just to name a few, depending on what you're doing. Okay, now let's look at the way they do it, places where they have less regulations. You buy that business license, you buy that insurance, you're good to go. If we have a problem, we'll come see you. Alright. Now let's say the item that we're producing we can sell for $15 a piece. It doesn't matter if it's made with less regulations in China or if it's made with more regulations in the US. So how does this is what the market will pay for it, is 15 bucks. So how does this affect the bottom line? Well, in the US, you would have the expenses it costs to make the item. Then you would have to pay for all the extra permits, and you would have to pay your workers' wages. Then whatever is left off of the top of that would be your profits. Now if we look over here where they have less regulations, you'd have to pay your wages and the expenses of your product. Guaranteed they may be up a little more. You may have to ship material in, and you'll have to more than likely ship your product out, but it's still going to be cheaper than doing all this. Now, with the price, I can get $15 for this product on the open market. So say the item cost me $4 in materials to produce, that leaves $11 for expenses and wages. Or it leaves $11 for, in this case, it leaves $11 for wages and profits. And the expense of shipping the equipment over, or the materials over and the product back. In this case, that $11 has to be split up between all the permits and all the wages of your employees. Now here's one regulation and price fixing that a lot of people are going to fall out with me over, is the minimum wage. Now, why is minimum wage bad? In the US, minimum wage is the least amount by government decree that a business owner can pay somebody. If that person would work for less, it doesn't matter. I have to pay them minimum wage. Now, you can look at other factors in history. In the US, before we had minimum wage and we had the Federal Reserve and we had all this stuff, in the 1800s, you can see where we had deflation. And yes, asset prices went down, and the prices of the stuff that you bought, the cost of living went down, but wages remained the same. And sometimes they might fall just a little, but the price of what you're paying at the grocery store was less than the price that you were paying the previous few years. There's people that's done extensive research on this, and you can find it pretty easily on YouTube and on the web. But because we can't allow prices to go down, this is a fixed expense. I have to pay that person $15 an hour. Well, how many of these products can he produce in an hour? Is he worth the $15 an hour? Well, when it gets to the point that he can't produce enough to be profitable, but these guys can, that's why your business has been moving overseas and places where they do stuff cheaper for the last 60, 70 years. The more regulations we have here in the U.S., the more it costs to produce stuff, the faster stuff goes overseas. They're going to produce it where they can make a profit. You see, if these companies ain't making a profit, it does them no good to be in business. Now let's move on. A lot of people like real estate. A lot of people like to talk about the real estate markets and things of that nature. And this isn't true for every place in the U.S., but it's true for a lot of places. If you go on the real estate market and look, a lot of houses, you'll notice a lot of newer houses are up around 2,500 square foot. And what's the reason for that? Why do we not have any 1,000-foot starter homes? Why do we not have the 1,200 square foot starter home, 1,500 square foot, 800 square foot? Simply because we have so many regulations in a lot of places that in order for a contractor, now you have to look, these contractors are working off of the market. If the market says they'll pay $100 a square foot, then the contractor has to figure how many square foot that house has to be for all his expenses and for him to come out and make a profit. And in most places, the magic number is 2,500 square foot. You know why everybody's keeping up with the Joneses? Some of it is people just want a big nice house and look fancy. The other part is the guys that's building the houses can't build them for a profit unless they build 2,500 square foot houses. You see, by the time that they add in all their expenses for their lumber, their materials, their man hours, their equipment, then they have to add in all the regulations, special permits they have to have. You know, they have to pay these people to come inspect everything. By the time they get all their expenses out, in order for them to make a profit off of what the market will pay, yeah, you could build a 1,200 square foot home, but you're going to have to cost the same amount as the 2,500 square foot home. Now, why is anybody on the market going to pay you $200 a square foot for a 1,200 square foot home when they can pay you $100 a square foot for a 2,500 square foot home? So, by increasing the regulations and taxes on these people building new houses in some of the bigger cities and suburbs, you've priced your starter homes plumb out of the market. Now, let's look at another sector. And this is one I know very well from the past couple years' experience, because I am a truck driver. I make these YouTube videos on the side, but my main means of making money is truck driving. So, let's look at how regulations cost you more at the grocery store and cost you more in shipping fees, and how these regulations, these newer regulations that came into play in 2020 that took effect in 2021, have the port of Long Beach, LA, and all up and down the coast of California backed up. We've all seen the shipping containers sitting out in the ocean. Some of them sit there for several weeks trying to get unloaded. Okay, so let's go into why. On your truck regulations, in the name of safety, they came out with the 11-hour and 14-hour rules. Now, this does not matter whether the truck driver feels like going on and driving, whether he wants to, or whether he feels like it. And if you ask anybody in the safety and compliance department, they will tell you, well, they do this for your safety. There's been recent studies that show since the 2018 one of the mandates they put out in 2018 that made most people go to electronic, actually caused more accidents. So how can we fix this? It's simple. You can make that optional. Now, if the truck driver feels like driving, if he sits in a dock for 5 hours and he still feels like driving for 11, what's the big deal? Why can't he drive for 11 hours? Now, let's look at other things. What does this actually cause? You're putting a limit on how far that truck can go in a day. Well, if the truck driver is capable of taking it 1,000 miles, but thanks to this limit, we can only do 750. Well, now what we got to have to ship stuff the same amount of miles? More trucks, more drivers, more cost. And we also have other regulations as far as IFTA taxes and other stipulations that they've stuck on trucking that cost more to ship stuff. Now on to why the newest regulations in California, enacted in 2020 while everybody was at home sick during the pandemic, and we were doing the whole 15 days to flatten the curve that turned into 2 years to flatten the curve. Anyhow, let's look at their regulations. While everybody was at home and everybody was worried about a pandemic and we all know what's going on, we got to keep this YouTube friendly or they'll take the video down. Anyhow, the state of California thought they'd go in here and increase some regulations. And this is why your ports are stacked full of containers and your container ships are circling around in the ocean burning diesel trying to get stuff to the port. California decided that they were not going to reissue the tags in 2021 for any vehicles that were older than 10 years old. They also refused to issue the tags in 2021 for any vehicles that had an older engine in them than 10 years old. Well, what's the numbers on this? Approximately, there's 400,000 trucks in California. In 2021 alone, the state of California took 80,000 perfectly good trucks off the road. Now, what other regulations have they done? Well, not to mention, before we get into anything else, by taking these 80,000 trucks off the road, what they've done is they've forced people to buy newer equipment if they want to stay in business. There's nothing wrong with the older equipment. The state of California just doesn't like it anymore, so now you can't drive it on their roads. The older equipment is usually the older style engines without all the EPA stuff on them. The engines usually last longer and require less maintenance. The newer engines, and I've drove both kinds, the newer engines seem to tire up more frequently. They're broke down more frequently for reasons due to the diesel exhaust fluid and the after system, as they call it, where they treat the exhaust after it's burned up in the engine. And we've got all these other components, and they don't tend to hold up so well. So now you got more breakdown costs. You've got some companies had to buy all newer equipment or shutter the doors. So regardless, they took 80,000 trucks off the road in 2021. Their estimate for 2022 was that was going to be somewhere around 125,000 trucks, maybe 150, roughly. So in 2 years, they have effectively took 30-35% of the trucks off the road in California. And why does this matter? A lot of people don't really realize this. I know I never really did. I understood that trucks had to move stuff, but I didn't understand to what extent they had to move stuff. In this country, we are so spread out and so rural in different communities, and you've got big cities, but we're so spread out. We're such a big country that if you want to move stuff from place to place, you have two options. One, you can put that on a rail car and ship it by rail from place to place if there's a railroad runs through that town. Or two, you can put that product on a truck and that truck can take it just about anywhere it needs to go. Now, if we reduce the amount of trucks that's on the road, we have a supply problem, because that is where our supply comes from. Those trucks move everything. Go to Walmart. They get a truck almost every day. If those trucks quit running because of government regulations, there will be nothing to buy. Your grocery store shelves, a lot of them have been barren. We've seen pictures on the news, and there's places where you walk in, and their business model is based off of a percentage of that retail price on every item in the store. If their shelves are not full, that is a problem for them. If they do not have product on that shelf for you to buy, they're losing money. So when you walk into Walmart, or you walk into Target, or you walk into your local mom and pop shop or the local gas station, and you go looking for an item and there's a bare spot on the shelf, yeah, you may pick something else up, but that store owner just lost money because he didn't have that item that you needed. Not to mention, you lost out because you didn't get the item you went after. So by removing these trucks off the road, they have created the supply shocks. They've created the supply problems. Now, what else have they done in California? That's just on the truck engines and the truck models. California also made the regulation that if you're coming to a dock to pick up or you're coming to a port to pick up a load, a container ship, you have to be unionized. All the dock workers have to be unionized, so now the truck drivers have to be unionized. Well, what's this do? This cuts out your small shops. Well, there's only 5 or 10 trucks in a fleet. This cuts out your owner-operators. This cuts out the guys that would come in there and get that stuff out and move it out without any questions. You see, a silly regulation like this has cost the whole country because we can't get the stuff out of the ports, and they want to blame it on the truck drivers. Well, the problem is the regulations they imposed on those truck drivers. They can't get in there to get the product. Trust me, we only get paid when the truck rolls. We don't get paid by the hour. If we're not rolling, we're not making money. So when you see these trucks, pictures of these trucks sitting on the docks, and they're going around interviewing them, and these trucks have been sitting there for a day, day and a half, that driver is not a happy camper. He's losing money sitting in that truck. Just because they impose these regulations, his load's still stuck on the boat because of the bottleneck in the port, because they won't let the trucks come in and get the stuff that needs to be got. Now, this is how regulations affect business. This is how your regulations affect what you buy at the store. You say, well, there's an item I want, but nobody can get it. This is why. There's less people afraid of the pandemic and of getting sick than what the media wants to tell you. Most of the reason we don't have stuff in our stores is due to regulations. Whether it be we had to buy it overseas because we've overregulated our factories, and now we can't make it here for a profit, has to be made overseas, and it's not because these people are greedy. You remember, this $15 price is what the market will pay for the item. If I have to jack that price to 20, they're not going to pay it. They'll pay 15, they won't pay 20 or 25. How many times have you went to the store and go, pick up an item and look at it, $20 for that, and lay it back down? Or $10, you really want to pay $10 for that? Why is that? Too many regulations. It's not because the business owners are being greedy. And it's due to these regulations. If we can reduce regulations, we can produce stuff for a profit in the U.S. cheaper than we can pay for it overseas. Have it shipped in here. And you can put your neighbors back to work. We can make stuff here again. So this is how all of the regulations, and it all ties in. It doesn't matter if it's in shipping. So, you know, when this is what the wholesalers will pay this man for this, $15. It may be $18 on the shelf. Why? Extra regulations. How much they have to pay to get it there? How much that retailer have to pay? You see, all of it adds up. Whether it's a can of beans on the grocery store shelf, or whether it's your TV hanging up on the wall at Walmart, or your favorite computer. There's a price for everything. And there's a price the market will pay for everything, and that price is what you can operate in to be profitable. And when these businesses are no longer profitable due to having to pay all these extra license fees and regulation fees, they have to meet all these extra protocols, they'll take it where they can get it done cheaper. So this is how your regulations affect your everyday life. If we can repeal a lot of these regulations and we can cut down the business cost and we can get private entities making money in the U.S. again, we can get out of this mess. We can once again become an economic superpower, and not just because we've got more green pieces of paper that we're printing, but because we produce stuff. I hate to keep rambling, but wealth is not how many pieces of paper you have. I can have $1 million in the bank, but if you look around and there's nothing to buy with that $1 million, it's just green pieces of paper. There's nothing I can do with it. Are you wealthy if you've got $1 million, but you can't buy nothing with it? Are you still wealthy? Truth is no. You're poor. Now if you've got $1 million and you get all these goods and services you can spend it on, then you can say you're wealthy. But by adding regulations, it makes us poorer as a society. It makes us have to ship stuff overseas and bring it in from other places to sell it here. It makes the price of getting anything done here ridiculously expensive. Think about the last time you hired a general contractor to work on your house. Had to have business license, insurance, all their equipment. And that's one of the cheaper things to start up. Yeah, it's expensive. You can start it, you have to rent a lot of your equipment to begin with, but there's not as many regulations in that as there are starting a factory. But it still costs a lot to get it done. And if we can reduce these regulations, we used to be the land of opportunity, and we can be again if we reduce regulations and make it friendly for businesses to get started in this country again. And with that, I'm going to sign off. Please hit the like and subscribe buttons and the notification bell in the corner. Please come back. We'll talk more about what we can do And we'll talk more about what we can do to get this economy up and going again. America has a lot of flaws as far as economics and as far as regulations and government business, but it can be fixed, providing enough people want to do something about it.